Sergei Rachmaninov ancora oggi è considerato, se non il più grande, comunque tra i più virtuosi del pianoforte di tutti i tempi. Purtroppo di Sergei Rachmaninov non abbiamo tante registrazioni, nonostante che in quel periodo i pianisti fossero registrati e quindi ci fossero pervenuti comunque DLP o 78G o varie registrazioni di vario tipo ne attestassero la loro capacità virtuosistica espressiva. Però poche cose che abbiamo, compresi i suoi grandi eseguiti da lui al pianoforte, noi possiamo veramente confermare che Rachmaninov è considerato uno dei grandi artisti e virtuosi della tastiera. Il colmo è che forse Rachmaninov non voleva essere un virtuoso della tastiera. Pensate che quando era ragazzo non aveva neanche cantato il pianoforte, viveva con la madre vicino a San Pietroburgo e la madre era molto preoccupata di questo ragazzo che non aveva tanta voglia di applicarsi il pianoforte. Allora parla con Shino, il maestro, e combina che Sergei vada a vivere dal suo maestro, dal nome Sberbank. Questo maestro lo faceva vivere in casa sua insieme a uno studente e lo trattava come missione in collegio, lo trattava come in collegio, cioè sveglia 8 ore al mattino, lavarsi, fare colazione, cominciare a studiare, suddivide il lavoro dello studio in un certo modo, poi insomma a fine settimana esecuzione davanti a degli amici musicisti, non amici musicisti e basta, ma amici importanti. E lì è in casa di Sberbank che Rachmaninov, Piotr Ilyich Tchaikovsky, che era considerato il più grande compositore russo, che gli dà la possibilità anche di scrivere una prima composizione, una trascrizione per pianoforte a 4 mani di un balletto, La bella addormentata, un Tchaikovsky aveva composto. Quando si diplomerà Rachmaninov nel 1809, diplomerà sapendo di essere grande compositore, possibile, un potenziale grande compositore, un potenziale grande direttore e perché no, un potenziale grande virtuoso. Diverse sciagure si abbattono di lui, al punto tale che lo fanno andare in depressione. Dalla depressione uscirà agli inizi del XX secolo e scriverà un secondo concerto dedicandolo all'analista che l'aveva avuto in cura, il professor Tardi. Prima però di uscire dal conservatorio, si diplomò nel 1900, si mise a scrivere dei pezzi di fantasia. Tra questi pezzi il preludio in do diesis minore, Le campane di Mosca. Ecco, pensate, quando Rachmaninov divenne famoso come pianista e cominciò a essere come pianista, in Europa, quando il pubblico pretendeva l'esecuzione di questo preludio, per il pubblico era la cosa più grande scritta da Rachmaninov. Questo abbiamo dovuto aspettare poi anni 60, Valentino, morto Rachmaninov negli anni 50, di eseguire tutto Rachmaninov per pianoforte, credo in 5 o 6 concerti, adesso questo non lo ricordo precisamente, però Fiorentino eseguì tutto, quindi le donate, eseguì i momenti musicali, che oggi sono famosissimi, sono stati eseguiti per la prima volta da Sergio Fiorentino, perché purtroppo anche il pubblico italiano, il pubblico dei grandi concerti, come quelli del quartetto per esempio, negli anni 40 a Milano il quartetto, non voleva sentire Rachmaninov che suonava la sua musica, voleva sentire Rachmaninov che suonava Chopin, Schumann, Liszt, eccetera, eccetera, e il do diesis, qualche volta anche l'elegia, sempre tratto dalla stessa fantasia operativa. Ecco, diciamo che questo è il preludio più semplice Rachmaninov, il più, come si può dire, il più giovane di tutti i suoi preludi, anche dal punto di vista armonico. non è assolutamente difficile, è un pezzo di grande effetto perché in qualche modo riproduce queste campagne, un'atmosfera molto cupa. È chiaro che va in depressione perché è abbastanza fragile, emotivo, e quindi dal punto di vista della sua stessa vita. Rachmaninoff nel 1893 si vede solo perché muore Tchaikovsky, che era il suo mentore, Zverev lo caccia perché voleva che lui facesse solo il pianista e non il compositore o il direttore d'orchestra. Avrebbe voluto sposare la cugina, non arrivava l'annullamento dalla Sacrarola precedente della cugina da sposare, insomma si era visto crollare in sé un po' tutto quello, anche il suo stesso futuro, e non si sapeva decidere che cosa fare di queste creatività. E nella vita poi finì, per tanti motivi, a continuare a fare il pianista e a scrivere sempre di meno musica, perché c'è stato un periodo in cui ha scritto veramente pochissimo. I concerti gli davano tanti soldi e quei concerti poteva, diciamo, avere un tenore di vita agiato che in qualche modo gli faceva piacere, anche perché gli faceva piacere perché esce dalla depressione, diventa famoso con i suoi concerti in tutto il mondo. E nel 17 cosa succede? La rivoluzione russa, la rivoluzione di ottobre, esattamente 100 anni fa. E in quella rivoluzione la famiglia di Rachmaninoff, con le figlie e la moglie, deve scappare da San Pietroburgo e rifugiarsi in Scandinavia. Da lì l'anno dopo se ne andrà in America, dove era diventato famoso, vivrà a Beverly Hills, una bellissima casa dove era russo in casa, gli oggetti, gli amici che trovarlo e di servire, però questo non bastava, ha vissuto esule come Chopin quasi tutta la vita, senza poter tornare in Russia. Ecco perché la musica è sempre comunque intrisa di nostalgia e di profonda tristezza.
welcome to today's talk, Thursday, 3rd of December. Now, I've got some pretty interesting data on the spread of Omicron and the symptoms and the risk of hospitalizations with Omicron today. We're keeping an eye on some critical information. And we're watching this on a daily basis, every time there's an update. So this is South Africa. So we see there's 9,300 people currently in hospital in South Africa with a positive diagnosis of Omicron. Only a little bit higher than the UK, about higher than the UK, with a similar population. So we see in South Africa are not being flooded with Omicron patients. They are simply not, and we're more than 4 weeks into this now. Patients on oxygen in all of South Africa of 60 million, 1,000 altogether, patients on oxygen in the whole country, in hospital, who have got a positive coronavirus 2 diagnosis, which, as we know, is 98% Omicron. So we are not seeing a dire develop in South Africa. We're just not. And then one more from this that we're keeping an eye on. This is the one from the UK. We will check this dated actually by the time we go off this recording. It's updated about now. The hospitalizations with Omicron in the UK currently, that's the number there, 195 out of 7,500. So 7,500 patients in hospital with coronavirus 2, 195 with confirmed. 18 deaths. We don't know whether these deaths are with or from. That's literally all we know about it at the moment. I want to look at some of the COVID symptom tracker information now. This is always fascinating to follow. This is live time. Zoe update. This was actually yesterday's update. Actually, just to prove its lifetime, let's just have a quick look at today's. This is today's. So we see over 1.5 million people symptomatic in the UK at the moment. Number of new cases are all-time high, 151,000. And we can see that the dots are further apart, aren't there? There's a sharp increase. So a very sharp increase to prevalence of, on the 23rd, which is today, the prevalence figure there is 1,549, so 1.5 million. Always good to get that up to date, bang up to date, basically lifetime data. And of course, the first thing I do in the morning, I put my mobile phone on and I update it. Now, these are the references for Zoe application. So 144,000 new daily symptomatic COVID cases in the UK, up to the average up to yesterday. It's a lot. In people who've had at least 2 doses of vaccines, there was 56,000 new daily symptomatic cases. So we are seeing a lot of people who've had 2 or 3 doses of vaccine who are, emphatically, are getting symptomatic COVID-19, believed to be mostly Omicron variant. This is breaking through big time into symptomatic infection. The people that are vaccinated, of course, typically they have a milder illness, they have less symptoms, and they're much less likely to be hospitalized. But they're still getting a lot of symptomatic disease. I'm sure a lot are getting asymptomatic disease, but of course, COVID symptom tracker study by definition doesn't pick those up. So 70% of cases in England are Omicron, we've moved over. The R value is currently 1.2, so we're increasing. The R value in London, which is leading the way, is 1.5. Now let's just have a look at some Zoe data now. I think we can see some of that. So these are the new symptomatic cases in the United Kingdom on the 20th of December. These are in doubly vaccinated people, so we can see there's a lot of symptomatic infection, and we can see that that's gone up dramatically with the Omicron. So we can see that the symptomatic infections have gone up dramatically in the vaccinated during this time of Omicron. So pretty clear correlation there. This is all people, including a lot who are unvaccinated. So that's new cases in the UK. This one is regional, and the thing to notice here is this is the London data. So symptomatic cases have shot up in London, and there is no question that where London leading, the rest of the country is going to follow. This is the pattern that we've predicted for some time now. New cases in the UK on the 19th of December, as we said, the R value is 1.2, so a sharp rise in new daily cases up to, well, as we've said, about 140,000. And that's just up to the 19th of December. Incidents by age group, so the 18 to 35s, particularly in London here, are the highest growth in number of cases. The more at-risk groups still, thankfully, are much lower. Let's look at some of our usual orientation graphics. The new daily confirmed COVID-19 cases per million, and we see that Japan is still doing best of all in the world. Australia, they are going up due to Omicron spreading, particularly in New South Wales, as we said. Canada going up. United States, the Omicron increase in cases has definitely started. France, Ireland, likewise. United Kingdom and Gibraltar. Now, I put Gibraltar on here because, now the reason I put Gibraltar on there is, as we know, Gibraltar is one of the most highly vaccinated populations in the world. Relatively small population, but the vaccination uptake's about 140% from what I remember. And yet we're still seeing all these breakthrough symptomatic infections in Gibraltar. These are breaking through the Omicron infections. The symptomatic infections are breaking through, giving symptomatic infection. Denmark still high. Denmark's actually reached its genomic sequencing capacity. But of course, all these people in Gibraltar that are getting these infections, they're being protected largely from hospitalisation, from severe illness, but they're getting a massive boost. This is a natural immune boost that they're getting from their Omicron exposure. So you could argue that this is potentially, could turn out to be the best thing that's ever happened. So we'll see, but that's looking fairly promising. Now, going on, looking at some more orientation. Number of patients in hospital per million with COVID-19. So Canada, Denmark. See, Denmark with high case detection, but not so high hospitalisation. United Kingdom going up slightly, we know. United States has remained high. This is mostly due to Delta in the United States still, but some Omicron effect coming through in France. Estimates of the R value. Now, this line here is 1. So anything that below this, the cases are decreasing. Anything above this, they are increasing. So we see that absolutely everywhere has got an R value of above 1. So Ireland, United States, France, Japan, even Japan, although it's not showing yet. Denmark, Canada, United Kingdom, and Australia especially. And we see that the R value in Australia there is about, what, 1.6 even. So cases increasing in those, all of those areas. New daily confirmed COVID-19 cases per million. Looking at the South Africa data here, so we see that the cases in South Africa appear to be falling off. The cases in South Africa appear to be quite low and appear to be dropping off compared to the United States and the United Kingdom. People, so and that's just up to the 19th of December. Incidents by age group, particularly in London here, are the highest growth in number of cases. The more at-risk groups still, thankfully, much lower. The vaccination uptake's about 140% from what I remember. And yet we're still seeing all these breakthrough symptomatic infections in Gibraltar. These are breaking through the Omicron infections. The symptomatic infections are breaking through. The best thing that ever happened. So we'll see, but the case, because there's not that much testing going on now in South Africa. So the reals are probably still climbing in South Africa. That looks like the most likely scenario. And then we look at weekly new hospital admissions for COVID-19 per million. In terms of admissions, yes, it is going up in South Africa, but as we saw, just over 9,000 for a population of 60 million, not yet at the Delta level seeing in the United States. New data confirmed deaths, and we see South Africa. Now, the case rate in South Africa grossly underrepresents the infections, but the hospitalizations and deaths are accurately recorded. So this is the case. The deaths are going up a little bit in South, not very much. Still below the UK, still well below the United States, and we believe this is accurate. And of course, this is after over 4 weeks now of Omicron. And new daily confirmed COVID-19 deaths per million people in South Africa. Well, first wave, second wave, third wave, Omicron wave. So natural variant wave, South Africa, beta variant wave, delta variant wave, and now this Omicron wave with much, much lower numbers of deaths. Now, I've had an email from Brian who's explaining the testing situation in South Africa. And he does explain that tests are actually quite expensive. So it's about $14 just for an over-the-counter lateral flow test. And it's twice to 3 times that for a PCR test. So a lot of people are just using these cheap lateral flow tests. They are testing positive, but then that doesn't go on to the official statistics. So we know from Brian and from others in South Africa that the number of cases in South Africa is greatly underestimating the number of infections. So the Omicron is just rampant in South Africa now, but as we saw, despite very high numbers of infections, not accurately reflected in the cases, still getting relatively low numbers of hospitalisation. Now, this data that we've looked at from the UK and from Scotland will pad out in time, but so far it remains promising that we will be able to cope with this. There will be more hospitalisations, but we may well be over a very short period of time. So that looks like what's happening over the next few weeks, and thank you for watching.
If you want to lead, start by saying, this is what I care about. This is what I want to do and why I care about it, and you should want to help.
Welcome to today's talk, Thursday the 20th of December. Now, I've got some pretty interesting data on the spread of Omicron and the symptoms and the risk of hospitalizations with Omicron today. Just before we do that, we're keeping an eye on some critical information. And we're watching this on a daily basis. I watch 2 or 3 times a day, every time there's an update. So this is the
Hi, and welcome to today's episode of Piano TV. So about a couple weeks ago, they had a music here in town, and a lot of my students participated in it. And I was there basically every day of the week. And I decided to take copious amounts of notes and just kind of absorb all of the information that the adjudicator was giving these kids in order to find some commonalities and just bits of information that I could then pass on to you and share things that I thought were interesting. I love music festival because even if you do like so good, you like blow everyone away, the adjudicator is still going to find something for you to work on. Like, for example, there was this kid who the highest mark I saw was a 90 all festival long, and he played brilliantly, and even he got suggestions. So it's just it kind of shows the kids that music is an eternal learning process, which is valuable to know as an adult as well. Anyway, let's get started. There are 4 main topics that we're going to cover in today's video. The first one is things related to the wrist and arm posture. It's probably one of the most talked about things on the festival week. And then we're going to kind of derail a little bit into staccatos. It's a short little category, but worth mentioning. Number 3 is interpretation and like how a piece is expressed. And then 4th is entertainment. So what we're going to do in each of these categories is talk about some important takeaways that I had from the week and kind of discuss finer points within each category. So fill up a chair if you're not sitting, or just keep doing what you're doing, and Anyway, let's get started. So most of you already know that the tune of the piece, the melody, is the part that needs to come out louder and more clearly than the harmony. So a lot of the times that ends up being the left hand is the harmony, the left hand needs to be more subdued, and then the right hand is the melody, which needs to project a little bit above it. But there are some actual like physical gestures that you can do unconsciously that sabotage your ability to achieve this hand balance. And there are also some kind of body movements we can do that wreck our ability to play quickly. So let's go to the piano and talk about this. If the arm bounces, the sound projects a lot louder. And sometimes that's the effect we want, but if we're playing like a really, I don't know, like nice melody in the right hand, and then the left hand's like bouncing, then the left hand is gonna dominate the right. It's gonna overpower it. So the best thing we can do there is to keep our arm steady and play with our fingers more. So there's the bounce, and you're steady. It's tough because it requires more finger control, but it's essential because it creates more sound control. So the other thing that the bouncy arm does is that it actually can slow down your playing. So if you're doing like a fast kind of passage like that, and you're kind of bouncing your arm, it looks so awkward when you kind of pinpoint it, trying to play like this, but it happens a lot, and I saw that more than once in festival. Yeah, where your arm is just kind of working against you. So when we want to play fast, we mainly fast from the fingers. It's all in finger control, and if your arm's kind of moving, it's just going to impede you. So the next thing we're going to talk about is wrist position, because how your wrist moves when you play is really important to having a good performance. It's super common for people to play with droopy wrists, kind of like this. And I think maybe we just were wimpy or lazy and we kind of lack the strength in the wrist to raise them up a little bit. But the problem with droopy wrists is they cause you to play with flat fingers. These are like especially my pinky, they all kind of like flatten out. Whereas when we raise the wrist, we can play on our fingertips. And if wrist is low, our hands flat, it's also really, really, really hard to play fast. It creates a lot of tension in there. So the adjudicator actually, she actually gave the kids this exercise where you hold out your hands and then you put your other hand in your hand, hopefully you can see this, and then you put your wrist down and you try to move your fingers fast, like you're playing a scale. And you can really feel tension in there, and it's kind of awkward and spidery. And then she gets them to raise the wrist, not the elbow, the wrist, and do the same thing. And suddenly it's like your fingers are free. They can move as fast as you want. So then we have the thumb drops. So some people play with perfect wrist posture until their thumb hits a note, and then it's like the thumb presses, the whole wrist falls down. And once you go back to the other fingers, the wrist raises back up again. Some people have problems using their thumbs in piano, and some of us don't. I find it kind of interesting why that is. I think it maybe just comes down to basic strength. But I want you to patrol your piano playing, because a lot of people did this. Make sure you're not experiencing the drop. And playing that way is also going to slow you down. Like the more time your wrist spends kind of dancing around, the less you're going to be able to play quickly. And it also, I don't know if you've probably heard this from these little examples, but it creates like an undesirable thunk. Like it kind of ends up creating an accent in a place where you don't always want an accent. So try to keep your thumb level as best you can. And for you, this might be really easy, but it also might be really hard. It kind of depends on your physiology. The next category is a quite important point, and it's on staccatos. So the adjudicator was really picky about articulations and staccatos in particular. We're not going to go into crazy depth here, but I just want to share some insight she had on how to make your staccatos come through more clearly, more quickly, so they don't sound so heavy, so they sound light like they're meant to sound. So she made a really good analogy with two different types of staccatos, and you tell me which one sounds more desirable. So you can have sticky peanut butter finger staccatos or crisp popcorn staccatos.
Danny
нет, ты что, тут столько снега если отменили, и на деле еще работы навалило.
Папочка, не скучает.
Кстати, давайте, пока. Салют, врубай Сберзвук.
I mean, peanut butter is delicious, but like as a finger analogy for how you play, probably not the ideal one. We want our staccatos bright and crisp. If they're kind of slow and lengthy like that, and sticky peanut butter fingers, it makes your playing almost sound lazy. And a lot of the times, the solution to this is to simply play on the tips of your fingers. So, and this has to do with wrist position too. So if your wrist is a little raised or like level, it's easier to play on your fingertips. Because if your fingers are a little flat and you're playing on the finger pads, it's really tough. I'm really struggling to create that like staccato sound. Whereas when it's rounded, it's much like nice staccatos that don't sound really thick. Since we were in the church, since we were in a church, the adjudicator had the kids put their fingers on the back of a bench, and then she had them try that out on the bench and just kind of listen to the clicking sound. So she had them play staccatos with flat fingers and listen to the clicking sound, and then she had them do it rounded and listen to the clicking sound. And it sounds a lot more like pop, pop, pop when you play with rounded fingertips instead of finger pads. So whether you're a kid or an adult, it's useful tidbit there. The third point is interpretation. So of all the points we're talking about today, posture and wrist stuff is obviously a really big, but this was possibly the most frequently mentioned of the topics, that of interpretation. So this includes things like creating a mood in the piece, creating a sound picture, we'll talk more about that, and telling a story with your piece, and also being able to play expressive and clear melodies. So let's talk about melodic shaping. We have a tendency to just kind of ignore slurs when we see them on the page. Like we kind of get it in a general sense that it means to play smooth, but there is more to a slur than that a lot of the time, especially when we're talking about the melody. So the adjudicator was always quick to point out that one of the most natural ways to play a phrase, let's look at this one just because it all fits on one line. So the most natural way to play a phrase is to rise, and you can kind of see the notes rise too, and then fall, and also you can kind of see the notes fall too. So how do you do that on the piano? Well, we can do that by creating a subtle crescendo and diminuendo. It's kind of like we're swelling up to the midpoint with just a gentle crescendo, and then we let the sound fall back down with a similarly gentle diminuendo. And what this does is it gives music a natural, lifelike, almost a breathing quality. Over and over, I saw her point out to the kids how important it is to have phrases that rise and fall, like a crescendo and diminuendo. Not like, not to like that dramatic degree, but subtly, like enough to make it kind of sound lifelike and breathing. Sorry, let me do that again. Everything I'm doing today is a C5 finger scale. It's just like a really good standard. Easy to demonstrate. Easy to play too if you're trying this at home. And it just kind of has like it's almost like a wave-like sound to it. I did a G5 finger scale. I'm switching it up. I love how frequently the adjudicator talked about painting a sound picture during festival week. Like a lot of the times we learn pieces with these interesting, expressive titles like the Stormy Sea or Mist, or like some of the ones I got on the screen here, and so on. So what she did is she asked the students how to paint that sound picture in the audience's mind. So how do we do that? How do we create a sound picture? What are the paints on our palettes, to go with metaphor? So our tools or paints would be things like staccatos, tempo, phrasing, etc., etc. And these are how we impact the overall mood and tone of a piece. So it's really important to consider all of these details when you're playing beyond simply learning to play the notes. So learning the notes of a piece is like a good first step, but there's so much more to music beyond that. And finally, the fourth point is entertaining. So she asked the question to a group of kids, what is the point of performing a piano piece, anything, performing anything? And none of the kids really, they were just kind of hemming and hawing a little bit. And so she told them the point of performing is to entertain the audience. We as performers are entertainers. Now, entertaining, I don't just mean like the ability to get people to stand up and start dancing or anything like that. Entertaining can be like, someone can be entertained by a heartbreaking rendition of a very sad piece, right? Like, it doesn't necessarily have to be like a happy thing. Entertainment is really just more about creating an emotional connection between you and the audience. You draw them in and they can get enjoyment out of it. So anyway, as a performer, it's your job to entertain. So how do you do that? So the first thing is to take risks. All too often what happens to us as performers, we spend all this time working on the details, but then as soon as we go and show it to someone or a group of people, all the details just kind of disappear. We get on stage, we get nervous, and we just like kind of clam up. I see this every year with my students. They can play beautifully in the classroom, they can play beautifully at home, very expressive, lots of dynamics, and then they get up on stage and there's like not a drop of dynamic contrast. It's all very flat. Or if the student has a really lively, upbeat piece, they're playing loudly in the studio, they've got all the zest and energy they need, but then they get on stage and play kind of nervously, they hold back, they don't go above like a medium volume. So as the adjudicator said, live a little, live on the edge. It is a huge risk, it's a huge emotional risk. It's not even a risk, it's a perceived risk to get up and play an emotional piece for someone and open up your heart in that way. It is taking a risk. It is a little bit of a stretch outside of our comfort zone, but it's an important one if we want to be able to play effectively. So another thing with posture that she talked about is when you're finished a piece, is it a good idea to just kind of like, and then your hands kind of like flop in your lap and you walk away? I mean, no, that like obviously I was kind of setting that up to be a bad idea. So when you're playing, say you're playing something like really beautiful, like lots of flowing sounds and phrases, how are you moving your hands? You want to move your hands in a rounded way. So let's go back to the first example. I know I'm getting like sidetracked here. So if a performer finishes like, they finish with like a loud fortissimo, and their hands kind of, instead of just, you do see the difference. It just adds to the entertainment value. It adds to that, like, to that confidence. And if you're doing like an expressive, beautiful piece and you're kind of finishing it like, it's kind of like a nice little elegant wrist instead of again. See, do you see the difference? How you move she kind of called it the beautiful dancing wrists. So how you move your hands when you play can kind of impact the entertainment value that the audience can perceive. We have so little else to do as piano players. We can't like dance while we play or anything because there's so much focus. So I mean, little gestures and pretty movements and stuff that get huge difference in the audience's eyes. And I think it impacts the way we play too. So as piano players, we basically like sit down and then we face forward the whole time we play. Like, it's not like with singers where you can kind of like get up and dance and make eye contact with people. That's why I'm not on stage singing, because that's how I'd be dancing. Oh boy. Anyway, so I want to talk to you about commanding the stage with posture. And I was super proud about my students this year because the adjudicator commented to most of my students that they did a great job sitting down on the bench, which seems like nothing, but they took the time to fix the bench, to make sure the bench was kind of in the right spot for them. We talked about this, we rehearsed this. They sat on the edge of the bench, which gives them like nice flat feet on the floor. They took a moment to get their foot on the pedal if that's what they needed to do. Waited, did like a breath or two, and then they played. So something so small like this makes such a big difference because it kind of shows the audience that you're confident and that like, you know, you're not just like running up to the stage and like sitting down the bench and like racing through your piece and then running away. Like, oh my goodness, get me out of here. You're kind of showing like that you're comfortable with this situation. You're okay moving a bench around in front of people because you're confident. You're not concerned. You're not freaked out. Even if your heart's beating a little faster, it gives the illusion of that confidence. It also allows you to play better because when you get set up in in the right spot and make sure you're kind of grounded before you start playing, you're going to have a more centered performance. And that is all for today's episode on just adjudicating music festival, the things that I learned that I thought might, help you. And I know most of you kids, there's probably a few kids out there, but even as an adult, these are still to kind of think about when we're playing. So hopefully you got something out of that. Thank you for
睇咗好大量嘅 comment， 同埋因為我老師咧係英國皇家音樂大學，同佢溝通之間咧，我發現到其實佢哋都注重一樣嘢嘅，呢個係絕對會慳你分數嘅一樣嘢嚟嘅。大家好，歡迎嚟到名門音樂，我係權老師啊。今日想同大家分享嘅咧 影片開始之前，記住俾個 like 啊！咁我哋開始啦。 睇完 Mango 條片都有個概念，大概點樣彈係可以攞到 distinction 嘅。咁日後咧我會拍加多關於鋼琴資訊嘅片啦。如果大家中意我嘅片咧，麻煩大家睇一下我嘅影片啦，都訂閱 subscribe 我嘅 YouTube channel、Facebook 同埋 IG 嘅。我係全老師，下次見啦。
Готовим стейк чакрол, как мраморность. Смазываем стейк маслом, мясо на раскаленный гриль. Спаржа припущена и тоже отправится. Подаем сливочный соус. Идеально. Не дайте ковиду лишить вас любимых вкусов. Выбор за вами.
師啦、家長啦，都對住 ABRSM 呢個 online music theory 網上樂理考試咧咁多個問題。呢個咧我喺 ABRSM 嘅官網上要同埋同考官去溝通之後，今日咧一一去解答晒呢個網上考試嘅題。
準備啊！甩完之後咧，仲要撳訂閱呢個掣。
Hello， 大家好，歡迎嚟到靈魂音樂，我係全老細。今日想同大家一齊去研究一下 ABRSM 網上樂理考試嘅所有問題嘅，包括你嘅名嘅過程啦。咁首先咧，報名日期咧係由4月26號到5月4日，咁而考試咧係由5月26號到6月23日嘅。咁網上嘅樂理考試咧，同埋呢個傳統嘅樂理筆試咧，到底咁ABRSM 咧喺早前3月12號咧，以你嘅地區即係香港咁啦，係有得考呢一個嘅網上樂理考試嘅話咧，不取消㗎啦。以後咧喺香港咧都會係考網嘅啦，就唔會再有筆試啦。咁所以咧，以後嚟咧我都唔係同，我會直接同大家講網上樂理考試佢個分數啦，佢係點樣。今次 ABRSM 呢個網上樂理考試咧，每分係5分嘅。首先咧，好多學生咧即刻就會想知道50分就係合格啦。咁別嘅話咧就係60分以上 ，distinction 咧就係60以上嘅。咁佢同傳統考試有咩加咗，有咩減咗咧？今次咧喺呢個網咧取消咗1C 去5嘅考試啦，呢一個題種啦。咁加咗啲乜嘢咧？佢加咗 cadence， 即係有 perfect cadence、imperfect cadence、table cadence 嘅題目嘅。好，咁啊，以下落嚟咧，我咧就係你考試前2個星期要做啲乜嘢啦，然之後考試當日咧，你係要做啲乜嘢嘅？考試前2個星期要做啲乜嘢咧？send 咧會 send 封信去你嘅 email 嗰度啦，咁裏面有一條 link 啦，咁我哋去裝一個叫 Now Software 嘅一個透過呢個程式去裝一個 PI 嘅 software，total 你裝咗5個程式啦。咁學生問我啦，喂，今次嘅考試你可唔可以用 tablet、iPad、手機去考呢個樂理咧？唔得，你淨係可以用你嘅手提電腦或者你嘅 desktop 嘅啫。好，咁你需一部可以上到網㗎啦，入頭㗎啦，有咪嘅手提電腦。咁另外，如果你朋友想同我講話係用 desktop 去考試，即係做台式嗰啲好一部手提電話咧，佢點解影你自己間房啊？咁嗰個咧一陣你可以睇我會放嗰條片嘅。咁我同大家講，如果你係有一部 notebook 去考試嘅情況下咧，咁你就要裝 ABRSM 俾你嘅 software 啦。呢個 RP Now software 咧就會幫你 check 下你部手機咧究竟啱唔啱佢哋用喺考試度咧。譬如話你嘅鏡頭用唔用到咧，你個咪會幫你 check 晒，可唔可以用喺 ABRSM 個樂理考試裏邊嘅。好，喺考試當日咧，如果學18歲以下嘅話咧，咁就需要家長老師去陪佢哋喺一間房裏邊考試啦。ABRSM 個官網咧，至開始之前咧，呢一段時間咧，呢一位成年人，無論係家長或者老師咧，你都係需要陪住18歲以下嘅考生嘅。咁直接開始考試咧，老師或者家長咧就可以離間啦。你如果選擇可以陪住考生嘅，咁網上咧有好老師啦、家長都問緊，哇，咁幾時考㗎？我都要準備㗎。咁佢嘅官方裏面嘅答法咧就係任何時你凌晨或者3點鐘起身考得嘅，咁當然冇人咁做啦。咁所以咧，點解 anytime 係因為如果你18歲以下咧，你需要家長陪同。咁但係1至可能1至6都有家 喺個考試嘅 period 裏面。咁如果15個家長咧就需要坐喺部電腦隔離，好似咁樣鏡頭咧，幫個考生咧去 show 呢一張 ID 卡啦。咁當然如果個張身份證係裏邊係冇自己嘅相嘅話咧，咁你就可能要用到 passport 啦，或者你嘅 APRSN 提供俾你嘅 identification。APRSN 咧網上亦都提供咗咧係點樣喺考場去預備嘅。咁除咗你話要喺面前去 show 嗰一 ID 卡啦，咁之後咧就需要咧拎住你部 note 用個鏡頭去 scan 四埲牆嘅環境啦，然之後咧就係考生嗰張台上面啦，同埋台嘅可能你打電話啊、書啊打開咗啊咁樣嘅。咁跟住然之後，如果你間房裏邊你屋企間房裏邊放琴嘅話咧，呢個琴蓋咧係需要閂埋佢哋咧，可以喺度琴蓋啦。咁當然啦，喺考試裏邊咧，你考生咧係需要用上啲草稿紙去計算嘅時候咧，咁所以咧你預備嘅草稿紙咧，無論係白少少嘅草稿紙啦、教學紙啦、5線譜都好啦，唔可以寫任何碌字喺上面嘅，係白少少嘅。然之後咧，每一頁第二頁嘅話咧，你哋3頁反面嘅 A4 紙都會睇你寫任何碌字貼紙嘅嘢喺度嘅。咁掃完之後咧，咁咧就可以考試啦。當然喺考試嘅過程裏邊咧，考生咧最 care 佢哋嘅問題咧，包括廁所位啊、佢哋嘅游水位啊嘅時間嘅。咁咧呢個我都一路都 search 咗啦。咁咧喺去廁所的話咧，你咧可以選擇2個做法，一張紙寫低嘅廁所啦，咁應該我都放英文啦，咁就係用話你係自己話去廁所，然之後將呢一張紙喺你嘅電腦鏡頭面前展示出嚟，你先好離開你嘅鏡頭。或者2，你喺頭面前去講你去廁所啦，咁你就可以離開啦。咁你離開個時間可以離開幾耐咧？5分鐘，你就可以離開 maximum 5分鐘嘅，最多5分鐘，你一定要翻嚟呢個位去繼續考試嘅。咁另外啦，飲水咧，你係可以有帶一樽支裝嘅水啦。咁當然支裝水裏邊咧，上面咧係唔可以有任何圖畫啊、文字嘅，純透明、全透明嘅一支水嘅。好，咁喺呢個樂理考試咧，呢個 program 開始之前咧，你係需要識晒你所有呢一電腦裏邊你用緊嘅嘢嘅，你淨係可以開呢一個 software 去考試啦。咁跟住然之後咧，如果係話你漏咗喎，你有個 YouTube 可能第3的話咧，呢個 program 咧佢係唔會俾你去開始呢個 APRSN 嘅網上樂理考試嘅。咁好啦，喺開始咗之後咧，如果咧你嘗試去收咗呢一個 software 去 click， 譬如話上網啊、上 Google search 喺答案咧嘅，只要你一出咗呢一個 program 咧，呢一個考試咧就會即刻中斷㗎啦。咁我相信應該都會係 DQ 嘅個考試。喺考完試之後咧，一定要喺個鏡頭面將你用過嘅草稿紙喺鏡頭面前咧撕爛咗佢咧先得嘅。如果唔得嘅話咧，呢個步驟係好嚴重。喺 APRSN 裏邊咧，佢個官網咧睇咗2條影片嘅，一條咧係包括咧考試前2星期要裝嘅一啲 program 啦，教你點裝點用。第2條片咧係考試當日家長要點樣 scan 呢間房啊、起下耳機啊等好多個步驟點樣資料。APRSN 咧佢會清楚咁所以咧，我會擺2條咧喺下面，咁大家如果想睇嘅話咧，就睇下所有嘅步驟。咁喺考試嘅時候咧，4期咧之後咧，你就會收到成績㗎啦。咁另外啊，如果你有興趣報讀我全本師嘅樂理班啦，咁你就可以聯絡以下呢一個電話，咁咧就可以。咁基於疫情嘅關係啦，有可能係上網上去教樂理啦，又或者現場咧由我去親身教你嘅。我係全老師，咁如果中意我影片嘅話咧，就讚好、訂閱同埋分享啦。我會不定期咁樣咧去大家介紹鋼琴更加多嘅資訊俾大家嘅。 我係錢老師，下次見啦，拜拜。
Конечно, это же 36 километров. Ну, приятный план, приятный план. Я бы сказал, вот это он имел в виду. Наоборот. Наоборот. Дарготы. Книга. Ну, вот это мне не будет. Вот это мне не будет. Да, ну вот это есть. Ладно. В смысле, как? Да, да. Ага. Ну да. Погода не погода. Ищи. Ты так не сиди, ты не сиди. А, ну, чё, шутишь? Ну да. Ладно. Не, ну да, как это? Ну вот это, да. Почему ты это нравится? Ну да, да. Да, это она и была. Ну, вот это да. Вот это да. Хорошо. как мне понравилось. Может быть, what? Ну, да. Только когда я знаю, сразу. Ну, наоборот. Да, наоборот, да, нет. Да, наоборот, да, это. Ой, не знаю. Я не... Ну, еще фотку смотришь, не знаю. Вот это единственное, да. Ну, нет, ну, наоборот, вроде есть какой-то, まずい。